Hi everyone, welcome to Creative Coders Toolkit, the channel where my goal is to share with you some cool techniques and some cool ideas for fun projects to try and just some really cool stuff to make. You might be wondering, what is creative coding? And at the heart of it, creative coding is just the idea of using technology to make art. If you've ever seen like a museum piece that's interactive where you've got different buttons and there's a screen and there's cool stuff, like, yeah, that's part software engineering, that's part woodworking, obviously, but at the heart of it is this idea of creative coding where you're using all of these different disciplines to put together something that's really, really cool. If you've ever seen an Arduino project that uses sensors and there's like wiring and stuff, at the heart of the Arduino is code. Like, you have to code the actual chip itself to read sensors and all of that. And so, not to go too deep into any of it, it's just the idea of using code and software to make really cool art. Sometimes it's musical, sometimes it's interactive, sometimes it's just really pretty. There's all kinds of different languages that you can use and all kinds of different programs, and we'll go into some of them. Obviously, if there's something you'd like to see, let me know. My email is in the description. It's just creativecoderstoolkit@gmail.com. But for episode 1 today, we are going to get into just setting up a really common platform for creative coding to happen, which is on the Raspberry Pi. What makes the Raspberry Pi so great for creative coding is the fact that it is such a small, cheap, fully functional computer. So it's just a single board computer. It's got USB, it's got RAM, it's got the processor, it's got a graphics unit. It's got everything that you need to run a fully fledged Linux computer. That's basically what it is. And it just runs off of the type of power that you would send a cell phone. Like, it's super small, super efficient, and they're constantly getting bigger and faster and more powerful and more capable. Today, I'm going to be working on this Raspberry Pi 4 Model B. These are all of the unique components that you need. So we've got the board itself. It's in a case with a fan. It's a really good idea to get a case and a fan for it. These, especially the Raspberry Pi 4 and the 3 before it, were kind of prone to overheating. They get very toasty. So having the heat spreaders and the fan really, really help a lot. We're also going to be overclocking this one today, so that helps when it really, really gets going. We've got the power supply. This is a USB-C power supply. You can use basically any USB-C power. It's not a bad idea to just buy the Raspberry Pi one all lumped together, just so you know that it's rated for the right power and there's no, mismatching. Any cell phone charger is probably going to work, but I bought this one just to make sure that I would have enough power actually coming from the wall to power the computer. You will probably need this dongle. It is micro HDMI to HDMI, unless you already have a cable that is an adapter for that, or if you just have something that you can actually plug this into. All of my monitors are either DisplayPort or HDMI, so you'll probably need some kind of adapter to actually go from either of the micro HDMI ports that are actually on the Raspberry Pi to a monitor. You only need one micro SD card, but I bought a multi-pack just so that I could have one main installation of the Raspberry Pi software And then when I find a project that's really cool after testing it on that main one, then I can start a new one over and just have that one idea be the entire SD card. So it's nice for prototyping, but you only need the one to get up and running. If your computer, like mine, doesn't have a micro SD card slot, then you might need one of these USB adapters. It basically just has extra USB ports and slots for SD cards and stuff. My desktop just doesn't, the case doesn't have the slots for it. So this is a super cheap accessory. Some other basic housekeeping: you'll need a mouse and keyboard, you'll need a monitor. Just if you've got a computer, then you already have those things. But if you do end up needing to start from scratch, any cheap HDMI monitor will do. Any mouse and keyboard will work, just USB. The Raspberry Pi's got plenty of ports. Don't, go out and buy a bunch of really nice, expensive things. You just don't need them. Any basic stuff will work. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and get our Raspberry Pi OS installed on the SD card. This is Raspberry Pi Imager. This is the software that you use to write the Raspberry Pi operating system onto an SD card. You have multiple options. So this is the main one. You've also got RetroPie, which is an emulation system. You can also put just random stuff on here. These are more advanced options. It's always a good place to start with just the regular Raspberry Pi OS. You just select the SD card that's plugged into your computer, select that one, and click Write. Warning about erasing what's already on there. It'll format and write the operating system onto the SD card. You don't have to worry about having to do much of anything with that. This process typically doesn't take too long, but we're going to cut right to the end. All right, now the SD card is done being written, and we are able to slot it into the Raspberry Pi and fire it up for the first time. All right, so this is just the first time startup. A lot of the times it will start up, show that splash screen, restart, and then show all of that stuff. That's just it setting itself up for the first time. And here is our desktop. All right, just a couple of things to get started with. Set your country, set your English, and set your time zone. US keyboard for me. I don't know about for any of the rest of you. Anything that we're doing on the Raspberry Pi shouldn't matter too much. So this is one thing I've never gotten that deep into. There's the Pi user account. It's like the admin account. You can put a password on it if you want to. But most of the time when you're doing anything in the terminal, you're just going to admin your way through everything anyway. If you want to set up a password, there's other videos that can show you how to set this up properly. So here's one thing. You've probably noticed that there is a black border around all of the edges, and that's because right now we just have the wrong setting for monitor overscan. Your Raspberry Pi might show up correctly. Almost always mine shows up with this black border, so all you have to do is just click this. You can always change that setting later. You don't have to do it in the setup, but yeah. I'm going to skip Wi-Fi network, but you just log into your internet with the name and password. I've got mine plugged in with Ethernet. And then letting it update itself. And there's other ways that you can have the Raspberry Pi update itself. This is just the quickest and easiest, just to get it all done in the like setup phase. This doesn't usually take that long. It's not a terrible time to go make some tea. All right, all of those updates finished. And now we can go ahead and restart the Pi, and then we'll come back when it's all rebooted. All right, so now all of our preliminary setup is done. Internet's working, the border around the screen is gone, everything looks great. So now we can poke around a little bit. So we've got applications currently installed and everything. You can play around with those. If your screen's still not correct, you can play with the screen configuration here. We can also open up the Raspberry Pi configuration file here. You've got some options for different things, more display options, interface options if you're using some of the headers that are built into the board, performance options, and then that localization stuff that we set up in the beginning. So anything that you set up, it's possible. You didn't mess anything up, you can still go back and change it and everything. All right, well, let's get a fresh coat of paint here. Just gonna open up Chromium. Here we've got the Raspberry Pi .org website. This has a lot of really great information. You can go into the forum and find answers for stuff. Reddit is a really great resource for answering questions that you might have about the Raspberry Pi. For right now, I am going to log in to Chromium. All right, now that's much better. All right, now last thing on our list of things to do today to just get this set up and ready for us is to apply a fairly healthy overclock. There's nothing to be afraid of. We're going to have to do a little bit of command line work. It's really not that bad. Just follow along here, and we'll be okay. Okay, so here we've got our command line. I just want to go ahead and make sure that we're all updated here. So we're gonna okay, that's fine. I just wanted that confirmation that everything was updated. Okay, so sudo is what you use to brute force your way. You're saying, I'm an admin, just let me do whatever I want. Nano is the name of a program that lets you do text editing within the command line. And the text that we're editing is the configuration file that gets run on boot. And so it's in the boot config.txt file. And so we can come down here. There's a lot of advanced settings in here. If you don't feel comfortable changing any of these, you're safer just not touching them. Like I said, go to Reddit, go to forums. You'll find answers for anything that's not working. And sometimes their advice is to go in here and tweak certain options. For us, we're just changing a couple of lines. And so we're going to come down here to the overclock. And so right here, ARM frequency. That is going to be our main CPU frequency. What we're going to need is set the over voltage so that we get a higher voltage amount to adequately power the overclock. And that amount is 6. I don't know what the 6 means. I just know that that is a safe amount for the amount of overclock we're going to go for today. So we're going to go for 2 gigahertz. And then we're also going to up the GPU frequency to 700. You can go to 750, but I'm fairly certain that that is the highest that people recommend you go before you start cooking your board. You can find a lot more information on this in other locations. I'm not an expert on this. These are just settings that have worked really well for me. To save it, you Control O. File name to write down there at the bottom, hit enter, and then Control X for exit. And now to make sure that those settings are saved, we're going to go ahead and do a reboot, and then I'll see you back here. All right, so the Raspberry Pi has restarted again. We've got our overclock set. We're logged into Chromium, and at this stage, we simply just have a functioning desktop computer. Like, this can do a lot of things that you would want just a regular computer to do. It's got VLC, it can play music, it can play videos. You've got Chromium, you've got different options. And then you've also got, under recommended software, there's other things that the Raspberry Pi organization makes really accessible for people and just makes it really easy to install and use. There's text editing software. There's there's all kinds of stuff that like, this is just a desktop computer now. So at this step, our Raspberry Pi is all set up and ready for future projects. Now is a really good time to figure out if your Raspberry Pi is functioning properly, if it's, maybe really slow, if it's not booting to the desktop, if you're having any kind of other issues, visual glitches, stuff like that. One thing to keep in mind is you are always able to pull the SD card out and go back and do the install step with the SD card reader in another computer, because you're not really going to lose a lot of progress. All we did was, log in and set it up. One time I did have to do that, and it fixed all of the issues that I was having. So if stuff's really not working, that is a viable option. If you can't quite get the screen to fit on whatever monitor you're using, there's a lot of forum posts talking about which settings to pick and how to get it to actually natively fit your screen. But yeah, anything deeper than that, like, I am not a Linux expert. I am not a Raspberry Pi expert. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not a lot of things. I'm just a guy that really likes creative coding, and I have a little bit of experience in a lot of things. If you have any more specific questions, you can always ask me, but what I'm going to do is the same thing that you can do, which is just like Google symptoms and try to find forum posts where people talk about things they did and whether it worked or not, and just kind of fiddling until you stumble into success. That is the name of my memoir, Stumbling into Success. But that's going to be it for today. I'm super excited to continue making this channel and getting into some really cool projects. If there's some stuff that you would like to see, always hit me up, leave a comment, email the channel. I would love to get into specific projects that people really, really, really want to see or want help starting. Because like I'm gonna learn from you guys just as much as you learn from me. So let's make some cool stuff.